One of the hardest truths about relationships is this: sometimes the end begins long before the breakup ever happens. And by the time most people notice the signs, the emotional distance has already grown too wide to close. Many men think a relationship ends when the words are spoken. But in reality, the emotional shift often happens quietly, slowly, and invisibly. Long before a woman decides to leave, something inside her begins to change. It starts with emotional detachment. At the beginning of a relationship, connection feels effortless. Conversations flow, small details matter. There's curiosity, laughter, and a natural desire to share life together. But when a woman begins emotionally moving on, one of the first changes is the disappearance of that emotional investment. You may notice she stops sharing the small things about her day, the random stories, the little frustrations, the excitement about things happening in her life. Conversations become shorter, more surface level. It's not always anger or conflict. In fact, sometimes it's the opposite: silence. Where there was once warmth and openness, there is now distance. And that distance isn't always loud. Sometimes it's quiet, polite, and strangely calm. Another sign appears in the way she responds to problems. Earlier in the relationship, disagreements mattered to her. She wanted to resolve them. She wanted to talk things through. But when a woman begins mentally preparing to move on, something shifts. She stops fighting for the connection. Arguments fade. Discussions become brief. She may say things like "it's fine" or "do whatever you want." And while that may sound peaceful on the surface, emotionally, it often signals something deeper. Because people only fight for things they still care deeply about. When someone begins emotionally stepping away, their energy follows, effort decreases. The desire to fix things fades. And this is where many people misunderstand what's happening. They believe fewer arguments mean the relationship is improving. But sometimes, fewer arguments mean one person has already started letting go internally. The emotional investment that once fueled the relationship is slowly being redirected inward, toward independence, toward distance, and sometimes toward imagining a life beyond the current relationship. Not because she suddenly became cold or uncaring, but because somewhere along the way, the emotional connection that once held everything together began to weaken. And when that emotional bond fades quietly over time, the person experiencing it often starts preparing for change long before the other person realizes something is wrong. Another powerful sign appears in the way attention shifts. In healthy relationships, attention naturally flows toward the person you care about. You want to know how they're doing. You check in. You notice the little details. But when someone begins emotionally moving on, that attention slowly starts to redirect. It's subtle at first. She may become more focused on her own schedule, her own plans, her own social circles. Activities that once included you begin happening without you. It's not always intentional exclusion. Sometimes it's simply a quiet shift in priorities. The relationship slowly moves from the center of her emotional world to the background. You may notice that she seems more energized when talking about things outside the relationship than when talking about the relationship itself. Work, hobbies, friends, new goals, those conversations suddenly carry more enthusiasm. Meanwhile, discussions about the relationship feel heavier, shorter, or avoided altogether. Psychologically, this shift often happens because people start investing energy where they feel growth, excitement, or emotional reward. If a relationship begins to feel stagnant, draining, or disconnected, the human mind naturally looks for environments where it can feel alive again. And sometimes that means building emotional independence. You might also notice a growing sense of personal boundaries. She becomes more protective of her time, her space, and her decisions. Earlier in the relationship, there may have been more flexibility. Compromises felt natural. Plans were made together. But now decisions may start happening individually, not necessarily out of hostility, but out of emotional separation. The language changes too. Instead of "we," you begin hearing more "I." "I'm thinking about doing this. I've been planning this. I might go here." These small language shifts reveal something deeper about the psychological transition happening internally. The relationship stops feeling like a shared identity and starts feeling like two separate lives running side by side. And when someone begins mentally building that separation, It often means they are preparing themselves emotionally for the possibility of moving forward independently. Not because they want to hurt anyone, but because their mind has already started adjusting to a life where the relationship is no longer the center of their emotional future. There is another sign that many people overlook, but psychologically it is one of the clearest indicators of emotional withdrawal: the loss of curiosity. When someone truly cares about you, they remain curious about your world, your thoughts, your struggles, your dreams. They ask questions. They want to understand you better. Curiosity is a powerful signal of emotional investment, but when that curiosity disappears, something important is changing internally. You may notice she no longer asks about your goals, your plans, or what you're working toward. Conversations that once felt engaging now feel routine or mechanical. It's not that she's intentionally being distant, it's that emotionally, her focus may already be shifting elsewhere. Curiosity requires emotional presence, and when someone begins mentally preparing to move on, that presence often fades. Another noticeable change is how appreciation evolves. In earlier stages of a relationship, appreciation flows naturally. Small gestures matter, effort is recognized, gratitude shows up in everyday moments. But when emotional distance grows, appreciation often fades quietly. Things you do that once felt meaningful may now go unnoticed, not necessarily because they lack value, but because the emotional lens through which they were viewed has changed. Psychologically, when people begin detaching, their mind often focuses more on what feels missing rather than what still exists. Positive actions begin to feel expected rather than special. And here is the deeper psychological reality most people don't talk about. When someone starts imagining a future without the relationship, their brain slowly stops reinforcing the emotional rewards connected to the partner. Memories shift, perspective shifts, expectations shift. The person who once felt like the center of their emotional world slowly becomes someone they are learning to live without. This doesn't mean the relationship has already ended, but it does mean that internally, a transition may already be taking place. A transition where emotional dependence turns into emotional independence. And when that shift reaches a certain point, reconnecting requires deep awareness, honesty, and genuine effort from both people. Because once emotional detachment becomes a habit, reversing it becomes much harder than most people realize. But here is the most important truth most people never hear. These signs are not about blame. They are about awareness. Relationships are living systems. They grow when both people nurture connection, communication, and understanding. And they weaken when emotional needs go unnoticed for too long. Sometimes a woman begins moving on because she feels unheard. Sometimes it happens because emotional connection faded slowly over time. Sometimes both people simply grew in different directions. Human psychology is complex, and often by the time one partner recognizes the distance, the other has already spent months processing emotions internally. That's why the real lesson here isn't fear, it's attention. Pay attention to emotional shifts early. Pay attention to how communication feels. Pay attention to whether both people still feel seen, respected, and valued. Strong relationships are not built on perfection. They are built on awareness and effort. The couples who last are not the ones who never face emotional distance. They are the ones who notice it early enough to rebuild connection before silence grows too wide. Because emotional connection isn't something that maintains itself automatically. It must be protected, nurtured, repaired when it cracks, and appreciated while it still exists. Sometimes the signs we've talked about today are warnings that something deeper needs attention. Other times they signal that two people may truly be moving toward different paths in life. Either way, understanding the psychology behind these shifts gives you power. Power to grow, power to communicate better, and power to build relationships based on awareness instead of confusion. Now I want to ask you something personal. Have you ever noticed these signs in a relationship, either from someone else or even within yourself? Write your answer in the comments. Your experience might help someone else understand their own situation better. And if this message helped you see relationships in a deeper way, make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with a friend who might need to hear this today.